Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm doing my review of AEW's Dynamite, Blood, and Guts. Starting off the evening, we have an MJF segment. MJF comes down to the ring. MJF grabs a microphone. He mocks Ospreay. MJF says the international title is worthless. He ends up throwing the international title in the trash can. After that, MJF presents a new title, the AEW American Championship. After that, Ospreay comes down to the ring. He mocks MJF. Ospreay then says it will be himself versus MJF at All In for a rematch for AEW's international title at All In. A couple of things I want to say about this, man. Number one, as far as the presentation of the, new title, if you want to call it that, the American Championship, I'm actually a big fan of it. The title looks really, really good. Now, I don't know if they're going to go with this championship moving forward, or this is just something that MJF presented to the fans and he doesn't want to represent the international title. But kicking off the night just with this segment alone, you had MJF in the ring, but Ospreay looks like he was trying to leave to go to the arena and get to leave the hotel to get to the arena, and then his tire was slashed by, I'm assuming, MJF. My initial thought process of this between MJF and Ospreay, the rematch, was one of those things where I was like, you know what, I don't know how this will play out. And I said, I think it was last week that I said, I don't know if I want to see a rematch between Ospreay and MJF. But the issue that you have with this is, and like I mentioned to you guys before, is All In is AEW's biggest show of the year. It's the biggest show of the year. It's AEW's WrestleMania. So you're not going to not book MJF or Ospreay on the card for All In, which, when you have MJF and Ospreay being the two biggest superstars in the company. Now, with that being said, am I looking forward to the rematch? Yeah. MJF and Ospreay, despite what most people believe, that match they had on Dynamite was awesome. It was one of the best matches on Dynamite for quite a while. And Ospreay has been on a barn burner since he's been, with AEW. So I'm all for a rematch between MJF and Will Ospreay at All In. And that's exactly what we're going to get in August. So I'm all for that. And definitely looking forward to that. Moving on from that, we go into our first official match of the night. It's for the FTW title. It is Chris Jericho defending the FTW title against Minoru Suzuki. I thought it was a decent match. It was a back-and-forth matchup with Jericho and Suzuki both exchanging chops throughout the match. Suzuki was keeping the pace of the match. Suzuki hits Jericho with a chair shot. Jericho gets up, hits a code breaker on Suzuki. Jericho then applies a wall to Jericho and Suzuki in the middle of the ring, but the hold is broken. Jericho then hits a low blow on Suzuki, which allowed Jericho to hit his signature Judas effect on Suzuki, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match and still FTW champion is Chris Jericho. After the match, Brian Keith and Big Bill come out to the ring to attack Suzuki, but Suzuki gets helped by Shibata. Shibata returns and attacks Brian Keith and Big Bill. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Shida versus Britt Baker. This is Baker's first official match back. First official match since she's been back with injury. It was a good match, man. It was a good showing by Shida and Baker. It's a back-and-forth matchup with Shida keeping the pace of the match, but Baker ultimately applies a lockjaw on Shida, and your winner of the match is Britt Baker. After the match, Mercedes Moné's music hits, and then Moné comes out to the ring, but as soon as she gets close to the ring, she's attacked by none other than Camille. Camille makes her AEW debut. She attacks Britt Baker, and it looks like Camille has aligned herself up with Mercedes Moné. A couple of things I want to talk about with this, man. This was a big deal. And what I mean by that is supposedly Camille has been signed with AEW since, I believe, February. And we are just now seeing Camille. And I mentioned now multiple weeks now that when are we going to start seeing Camille? AEW has signed all this talent, and we have yet to see them. And they've been on the shelf. I know Camille was looking to do independent dates because she wasn't getting the TV time on AEW television. Now that Camille has made her debut with AEW and aligned herself up with Mercedes Moné, I'm all for it. This version of Camille, Camille, number one, if you guys don't know who Camille is, Camille had a really good career in NWA and working under Billy Corgan, and she was the former NWA Women's Champion and held that belt for quite a while. Now, when I officially watched NWA Power, she was still Women's Champion, but she aligned herself up with at that time, the current NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Nick Aldis, and she was more or less the muscle, if you will, for Nick Aldis. And it's exactly what we're getting now here with Mercedes Moné. Some people, I think, are against it, that Camille came in as a heel and has aligned herself up with Moné. I'm all for it. I think, number one, it's great for Camille to finally get TV time with AEW. Camille is built like a powerhouse, a complete powerhouse. And to have her align herself up with Monet is going to be great for both parties, meaning Monet and Camille. Monet, as far as I'm concerned, Mercedes Monet coming into AEW, she never needs to be a babyface. She needs to be a heel. I think Mercedes Monet, from here on out, plays out better as a heel than it would be a babyface. And right now, with the match that Monet's got set up with Britt Baker, and now obviously Baker has the card stacked against her now with the addition of Camille aligning herself up with Mercedes Monet. This might also open the door, possibly, of bringing in Jamie Hayter to align herself back up with Britt Baker to keep Britt Baker safe, leading up to the match at All In between Monet and Britt Baker for the TBS title. I'm all for that, and I think this is exactly how it's going to play out in my mind, that this is a perfect opportunity to bring in Jamie Hayter to protect Britt Baker against Camille and, align herself back up with Britt Baker. I'm all for this. I think it's about damn time that we see Camille. I think Camille is going to be a force to be reckoned with within the AEW women's locker room and the AEW women's roster, and a future world champion for AEW. I can see that happening. To me, this might be also something, too, that we kind of get the same thing in the aspect of Camille possibly turning on Monet or Monet possibly turning on Camille later down the road, just like how Toni Storm had with Mariah May. This might be the same thing, but at the same time, too, it also gets Camille television time with AEW. It finally gets her in the rotation for AEW, and it keeps Monet a heel. And that's exactly what Monet needs to do being in AEW. She needs to be that heel, that top heel in the women's roster that everybody's gunning for, that everybody wants to take down, especially now that she holds the TBS title. So I'm all for this. I'm absolutely all for this, and I definitely cannot wait to see Monet defend that TBS title against Baker at All In. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. This was a glorified squash match. This was Pac versus Boulder. Like I said, man, this was a squash match. Pac was keeping the pace throughout the entire match, with Pac hitting a brainbuster on Boulder, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Pac. Hats off to Pac for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. Is Mariah May versus a jobber. This was a glorified squash match with Mariah May keeping the pace throughout the match. Mariah hits a Mayday as well as a hip attack, and then she finishes the match off with a Storm Zero, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match is Mariah May. After the match, Toni Storm music hits. Mariah May is staring down the entrance ramp. She doesn't see Toni Storm, but Toni Storm gets into the ring with a disguise. She ends up attacking Mariah May, and it looks like this is just setting up the match that they're going to have at All In for Toni Storm's AEW's Women's Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW's Blood and Guts. It's the Blood and Guts matchup. It is Team AEW versus the Elite. I thought it was a great match, man. Perry and Darby both start the match. It was a back-and-forth matchup with Perry hitting Darby with a chair shot. The Elite were keeping the pace of the match. Page music hits, but he doesn't come to the ring. Page then attacks Swerve as Swerve's coming down to the ring to enter the match. Swerve then is handcuffed to the cage. Page is pretty much beating the hell out of Swerve, even hits him with the AEW World title. Eventually, Matt Jackson gets a little pissed off. He says if Page doesn't get in the ring, Page will be fired from AEW. Page finally gets in the ring. Jeff Jarrett comes out down to the ring. Cutler as well. Billy Gunn is here. Gunn and Jarrett then attack Brandon Cutler. They're trying to get Swerve out of the handcuffs off the cage. Nick then slams Anthony Bowens into the cage, which then has Bowens landing on the outside of the cage, going through a table structure to the outside. Briscoe then hits a J Driller on the Elite. Darby then hits a coffin drop off the top of the middle of the cage. Briscoe then hits Perry with a chair while Perry is chained to the cage. Darby then goes to pour gasoline on Perry. Matt gives Darby a TNT title match opportunity at All In. Darby then goes to light Perry on fire, and then Matt Jackson says that we have had enough and says, I quit. Couple of things I want to talk about, man, with Dynamite and Blood and Guts last night before I get out of here. Number one, do I think it was a good show? Yeah. I think Blood and Guts last night really did deliver. Now, I know a lot of people were upset in the fact that there really wasn't any build towards this year's Blood and Guts. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to sit here and say that you guys ain't wrong. You know what I mean? I get totally what you guys are saying. But what I will say is what happened last night with Blood and Guts vocalized a lot. Number one, this is a lot of the stuff that happened last night in the Blood and Guts matchup has storylines within itself. that are going to play out for the next couple weeks into possibly the next couple months. And what I mean by that is if you remember the match last night, if you guys watched the match, you see Matt Jackson telling Darby Allin before Darby was go to light Perry on fire that, Matt Jackson was going to give Darby Allin a TNT Championship opportunity at All In. Now, do I think this is going to happen? Yeah. I think Darby Allin will get a TNT Championship opportunity at All In for the TNT title, which I'm all for that. The Young Bucks pretty much have themselves lined up with the Acclaimed, which is probably going to happen at All In. And then you have Swerve and Adam Page. And the reason why this is interesting, obviously there's still some hostility there between Page and Swerve. And rightfully so. Swerve right now is the current AEW World Champion. I know he has a match with Bryan Danielson at All In, which Danielson has rightfully earned, by competing and winning the Owen Hart Cup Tournament Final. I'm all for that. I think the Bryan Danielson match with Swerve is going to be a fantastic match for All In. The reason why Page is relevant in this story is obviously there's some unfinished business here between Page and Swerve. And you guys have to remember this. There's All In August, and I think a week and a half later, we have All Out. They need to start booking and start building storylines towards All Out. And I think that's why we're going to get Swerve versus Page at All Out for the AEW World title if Swerve successfully defeats Bryan Danielson at All In. So I'm all for this. I think Page versus Swerve at All Out, I'm all for it. They have to pretty much build up towards the pay-per-view for All In as well as All Out, because All In and All Out are literally back-to-back against each other just like it was last year, and I feel like that's going to happen for the foreseeable future when it pertains to All In and All Out with AEW. But I think AEW fired on all cylinders last night. I really do. You got the return and in-ring return of Britt Baker. She's obviously been out with injury for quite a while, so to see her back in the ring, obviously there's a little ring rust just because she's been off the scene for a little while with AEW, but it was a good match, a good showcase by Baker and Sheeta in that matchup. But to be honest with you, man, I think, the biggest takeaway, the biggest negative I would say about last night is literally the blood and guts match in the aspect of where does this storyline go, if there is one, between the Elite and AEW with Tony Khan. How long is this going to play out, and how long is it going to get to a point where what are we doing here? And I think that's the biggest takeaway from last night. I'm not sitting here saying that the Blood and Guts match was awful. I think it was a great match and delivered a lot of vocal points that will take place over the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months for All In as well as All Out, which I'm all for that. It's setting the tone for what's going to come down the pike here with All In and All Out. But when it pertains to the Young Bucks and the Elite, with Tony Khan and AEW, where does that storyline go and where does that storyline end? And I think that's the biggest question mark coming out of last night when it pertains to that story. And I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing that has me shaking my head on is what the hell are we doing here with the Elite and Tony Khan and AEW? I mentioned multiple times in the past where if I was fantasy booking this, it would be as if, Tony Khan and the Elite can't be under the same roof. And you move the Elite over to Collision, have them over there for a year, let them build up Collision, make it their own show and how they want to do it, just like how the NWO did back in WCW, and let them run roughshod on Collision. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. And the other thing is, I understand why AEW and Tony Khan are putting on these high-profile matches. I mean, last week we got Ospreay and MJF as well as Okada and Swerve. The reason why we're getting that, ladies and gentlemen, is because right now AEW and Tony Khan are in severe contract TV rights talks with Time Warner and Warner Media. And I think that's why we're getting these high-profile matches. So, obviously Tony Khan can present this to the representatives of Time Warner and Warner Media. I know Tony Khan is supposed to meet with one of the executives from Time Warner or Warner Media this weekend during the Olympics in Paris, France. And hopefully at some point of this weekend, we get some more insight on what's going to happen between AEW and Time Warner as far as TV talks are concerned. Now, do I genuinely believe that AEW would not be with Time Warner coming next year? No, I think AEW will be with Time Warner because right now there's no other suitor right now for AEW to be on television right now, in my honest opinion. The other biggest thing that I will say this, and right now it is speculation, but things are starting to add up, is that TNT was obviously in talks with the NBA to showcase the NBA games moving forward and signing that TV rights deal with the NBA. The NBA has been a part of the TNT family for quite a while. But that doesn't look like it's going to be the case anymore. It looks like NBC has got the rights to the NBA package and showcase those games, which NBC hasn't showcased, from what I understand, showcased NBA games in quite a long time. So this might open the door as far as TNT, AEW, and Time Warner working together exclusively, where Tony Khan and AEW do get a significant amount of money to showcase AEW for the next 5 years, or who knows how long their TV rights deal would be in these new contract talks. But it looks like with the NBA moving over to NBC or Amazon or whatever have you, it might free up a lot of money for AEW to acquire that asset and acquire that money from Time Warner to move forward with, obviously having Dynamite and Collision on TBS and TNT, which would put AEW in a really good position moving forward. Now, obviously, I think the biggest thing that I can wish for if the TV rights deal goes ahead and they continue to work with Time Warner and Warner Media would be the aspects possibly of AEW working also with HBO Max and having that streaming deal not only for AEW but AEW's fans moving forward. I think that would benefit both parties, meaning Time Warner, Warner Media, and AEW and Tony Khan, to have Dynamite content on HBO Max. I think that would be a great addition going in possibly into the new year. I think it would be something where it would, like I said, it would benefit both parties. AEW's been around now for about 5 years. They have the catalog now with just HBO, just with AEW pay-per-views now for the past 5 years. So they have the content that they can use and put on HBO Max, and then having, if you will, PLEs a part of HBO Max for AEW. I think it'd be a great thing for both sides of the fence for fans of HBO Max as well as fans of AEW and pro wrestling. I think it would be benefiting both parties involved here. But like I said, man, AEW, it's one of those things where, in watching Monday Night Raw and reviewing that show for you guys and watching Raw, and then you watch AEW last night, I mean, there's obviously a significance of difference between both WWE and AEW. And I mentioned that when I did my Monday Night Raw review, that the production value of Monday Night Raw and WWE is top tier. Absolutely. Way above what AEW is doing right now. Not taking anything away from AEW, but WWE's product right now is firing on all cylinders. SummerSlam this year looks incredible. It's going to be at the Cleveland Browns Stadium. You have live performances from Jelly Roll. You have top matches from Cody Rhodes and Solo Sikoa to Damian Priest versus Gunther to Bayley versus Nia Jax, to Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan. I mean, you have top level matches for SummerSlam this year, which I'm definitely looking forward to for SummerSlam this year. So, I mean, AEW is a little bit behind the track a little bit when it pertains to, if we're looking at both WWE and AEW. But I still have a lot of faith in AEW. I think Tony Khan, with the storylines and stuff like that and building up towards AEW's All In, it was a slow burn last night. But we got more information and more insight on what's going to happen at All In, like with the announcement possibly of Darby Allin versus Jack Perry for the TNT title. You got the Young Bucks versus the Acclaim possibly at All In. So, I mean, they're starting to slowly build towards All In, where if you guys remember last year, it was about 3 weeks in leading up to the pay-per-view that we started getting matches announced for All In. Now that we had matches announced pretty much a month before, All In, this will give the fans an opportunity to kind of sink their teeth into these storylines and what the hell was going on with these matches to get the fans insight on these matches and get them actually in tune with what the hell is going on with these matches. So I think that's a big benefit for AEW as well as the fan base for AEW moving forward. And hopefully Tony Khan continues to keep doing that with AEW. But it's going to be a crazy summer for AEW. I think it's going to be a crazy year for pro wrestling, but, specifically AEW. The TV rights deal is coming up. Obviously, Tony Khan's talking with executives from Time Warner this weekend, and hopefully we get some insight on what the TV talks is and what the deal is going to be for AEW moving forward, possibly with Time Warner. We have AEW's biggest pay-per-view of the year, All In, coming up here soon, probably within the next month. So it's going to be crazy, man. All In's always the biggest show of the year. It's AEW's WrestleMania, so I'm all for it, man. I think AEW did a really good job last night. I know a lot of people, like I said earlier, are disappointed with no build towards Blood and Guts, but I think, what they did last night in the Blood and Guts match really vocalized a lot when it pertains to All In and setting up matches, setting up a little bit more storyline here, if you will, between the Elite and AEW. And like I said, I mean, the biggest outcome or the biggest negative I would say about last night's show is, like I told you guys earlier, how long is this somewhat, or whatever you want to call it, storyline between the Elite and AEW going to last, and where is it going to end? I think that's the biggest takeaway from last night. Other than that, the show was really good. Seeing the return of Tony Storm, seeing the in-ring return of Britt Baker. And like I mentioned earlier, when it pertains to Baker, this will be the perfect opportunity for Tony Khan to bring in Jamie Hayter back from injury, if she's cleared and ready to go, to align herself up with Britt Baker to protect Baker, because Baker now has not only Mercedes Moné to worry about, but the new addition of Camille to worry about. And Camille is a powerhouse. And I think Baker needs some backup, and what better way to have that backup than former AEW Women's Champion being Jamie Hayter, and put her back into the mix and back into the fold with AEW. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's Dynamite Blood and Guts. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.